What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Maria Britos. And guys, it's hard to believe that in just the span of a week, a lot can happen, and it is typical of what we see here in Paraguay. But we do have a big Superclasico that we need to talk about. A lot has happened ever since that game. We'll also talk about what this means for one club in particular that are battling out a Copa Libertadores competition, while the other one is trying to figure out what's going to happen to them in their future until they get their Libertadores campaign starting. We also got some Sudamericana games starting off today with some teams in Paraguay taking on each other to see who has the potential to go far in that competition. But oh man, I mean, Fed, I'll go to you on this one. I mean, talk about in the last, I'd say 3-4 days, a lot has happened, and it almost feels like, yeah, we only have like a couple, at least maybe an hour to get through it. But I feel like, man, it could be talked about for hours if we had to, but we're going to limit to ourselves. I mean, what a huge Superclasico that we saw at Para Uno the other weekend, and of course what that meant for one club's result, which I think for all of us here, we didn't expect it at all.
Yeah, it wasn't really a surprise to see Julio Cesar leave Olimpia after the Superclasico. That's what happened right after this the two tie between Cerro Porteño and Olimpia, the clash down. It was a showdown. I mean, it was a really good game. Just in general, I think if we're just going to talk about the game itself, yeah, we could be here the whole episode because a lot happened during the match. There was a lot of VAR interaction also, and the ref really had a lot of work on him. So yeah, obviously we got to talk about some players that really stood out, some players that would look like the villains of the Superclásico. Also, Miguel Martinez getting sent off for Cerro Porteño. That was a big game changer when he got the red card. Yeah, we definitely got to break this one down, Roberto, because it is one of those games that it clearly is a before and after, right? Because before, Olimpia looked really strong at the beginning of the year, and after these last three games, not just the Superclásico, Olimpia lost against Trinidense, they tied against Guaidenia at home, and they couldn't beat Cerro Porteño at home. They were losing 2-0 most of the match. So clearly this was put on top of the table when they discussed it with Julio Cesar after the game. And clearly they were seeing eye to eye. That's why they let him go. And now we got to see who Olimpia is going to bring in his place, who they're going to give the job to. We teams making it big maybe for themselves. We definitely got to talk about who might be a surprise there, and some of those teams are not really doing good in the local league, so we'll see if they can totally change it around in the Sudamericana this week. Cerro Porteño also has Libertadores, and the women's game is also back after what we saw and after what we talked about a couple of episodes ago with the national team, with the women's national team playing for their chance at the World Cup. Unfortunately, that didn't end up happening. The local league is back in action, or it has started for the 2023 season, and happy to see the girls back in action. We got some really good teams, a lot of signings, a lot of the girls that left the country, they went to really big clubs, and we'll see how the big teams accessorize this situation. We always have our favorites, and I don't think it's going to get out of that way this season either, Roberto.
No, absolutely it's not. I think we always see that time and time again in this season. And I want to go to Maria on this one because I think certainly, for something like an Olimpia, we're going to obviously keep in our conversation with Olimpia for now, but then also talk about the Superclásico as a whole. I think this comes really at a bad time, I would say, because obviously, yeah, they're not exactly going into the start of the season very well, even with the 2-2 draw. It didn't help them at all. I mean, the fact that they're still in fifth place and they're really behind a Libertad side who got the win against Trinidense. That was one of the games that everyone was looking forward to outside of the Superclásico because it was two teams that were fighting it off at the top of the league. Libertad get the win there. Now they've extended their gap even more. So for Olimpia's case, I mean, it feels like this is coming at a wrong time. But also, I feel like, if it comes in this, if this is made like right now, at least it's being done before the start of the group stage of Libertadores, which will begin, I think, next month, if I'm not mistaken. So for them to make this change, it was definitely likely, but at least for me, and I think for a lot of people here, I didn't expect that a draw like this, especially in a Superclasico, would be deemed a sackable offense, because I think what we saw there was an Olimpia side that came back and did well to think that, yeah, this team doesn't give up. But I think for some, the directors of Olimpia, they're like, maybe this wasn't good enough. And the results beforehand thought, yeah, we need to get rid of this guy as soon as possible before it gets even worse.
Yeah, definitely. It was a shocking news for everyone, especially for Olimpia fans and pretty much everyone that follows Paraguayan soccer. I think it was something that was probably already in the books for the administration. There was, talks of Julio Cesar Caceres, tweeting and posting and just writing all these weird secret messages online that suggested that he was probably already he probably already saw this coming. So it was definitely a weird timing for them to do this, because yes, David, they haven't won a game in 3 matches, I would say. But I don't think that it's a sackable offense to a game after the Superclasico. A Superclasico, it was a big game, and obviously you wanna come out the strongest team there, but they ended up tying, and we all thought in our last episode we all thought that it was gonna be a tight game, that it was gonna be ended up tying. So to me, I think that they could have probably waited a little longer if they were thinking, or could have done it earlier if they were thinking about already sacking him. But honestly, I don't think that it was worth for them to let him go just yet. They have big games coming up, like you said, Libertadores, and it's gonna be a tough one again, like what Cerro Porteño has been going through after Chiqui Arce's left. So we'll see what happens to them. It's gonna be a tough one, I think, for Olimpia. I don't know who they can put it to replace him right now. There's been talk about Chiqui Arce as well to come and replace him. That's crazy to me. I mean, I don't know, that rarely ever happens in soccer. A manager comes and plays comes and takes over for their arch rival after a while. So it's crazy. It's just dramatic Paraguayan soccer, and I love it. I love it.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, and then also we'll talk about the possible managers as well. I mean, Chiqui Arce has managed Olimpia before, and so this isn't something that it's a case of loyalty. It happens all the time, so it's definitely not surprising. But yeah, we'll get into that in a bit. But we'll talk about what actually happened on the pitch at Paraúna. Obviously, we saw Olimpia take on Cerro Porteño in the first game of basically the first Superclasico of the season, taking place at the Estadio Manuel Ferreira at Paraúna, a game that really was controlled by Cerro Porteño really on. First on, they scored in the 43rd minute, goal from Alberto Espinola, followed into a second goal in the 65th minute by Claudio Aquino from a penalty. But it was after that everything started to fall out for Cerro Porteño. In the 72nd minute, Miguel Martinez, who actually is obviously coming in, if for people that don't know, came in for the replacement of Jean Fernandez, the regular starter who's actually injured at the moment. He comes in and has been, a bit kind of inconsistent in performances so far, not exactly having his high, remarks and definitely his praise, but he's made a foolish mistake right there in the 72nd minute where he used his hands outside of the box. Obviously, a goalkeeper can't do that, and therefore he was, of course, sent off. In comes, for his first ever game in a Superclasico, Jose Mieres, a 22-year-old goalkeeper who's been in Cerro's books but had never played a first-team game beforehand, now is given the responsibility to hold a 2-0 lead in his first ever game in a Superclasico. I mean, talk about drama. And then Olimpia go in and charge forward. 76th minute, Alejandro Silva scores, and then a foul in the box from Mieres to Olimpia saw Derlis Gonzalez score in the 86th minute to snatch a point for each two sides. I mean, Fede, we'll go to you on this one. I mean, how can we assess such a dramatic Superclásico in just a short amount of time? I mean, we saw it all. We saw the red cards. We saw a Cerro Porteño side that I think ultimately dominated this entire game. And I think if you are a Cerro fan, I think you'd feel disappointed, not just because of the fact that you obviously conceded a 2-0 lead, but also because you just played so well, and you were better of your rivals, especially when you're playing, outside of your home ground. I mean, I think if you're a Cerro fan, I'd feel frustrated. And I think if you're an Olimpia fan, you could also feel very frustrated because you think, like, how on earth can this happen when we've been such a good side from home? And for both these sides, like I said, I think, this is certainly not a good result for either of them, especially, like I said, with the Libertad win, giving them the advantage to extend themselves even further to win the league title. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this? And, what can we take away from any team really now looking forward into the rest of the season?
Well, let's keep in mind that when both teams face each other, that we're thinking about winning. I mean, for either of these teams, a draw was going to be a good result because of the distance that was already there with Libertad that had to play on Sunday. So obviously we're going to see a fun match. And I think I said it last time around when we were going to see a lot of goals, and we ended up having 4 on this one. I think it could have even had I think either team could have won it right there at the end because it was just a battlefield those last minutes, right? It was pretty much from box to box, both teams having opportunities. But yeah, if we got to break it down, I mean, that first half, I think Olimpia was surprised by that high pressure of Cerro Porteño, taking the ball away from the defense constantly, having problems. Olimpia did not resolve that situation. So yeah, just like you were saying, Roberto, Cerro looked better. Cerro was playing better. They deserved that lead when that first half was ending, and they got that goal. And I think they really deserved that situation. Olimpia wasn't doing much, especially their stars. You were waiting to see something out of Derlis Gonzalez, but you saw Cerro Porteño side that was really strong because it was the same team that had been playing in Libertadores. A lot of people were thinking that the coach was going to mix it up, that he was going to bring players that were kind of rested, but that wasn't the situation. This was pretty much the same team that had played just a couple of days ago against Curicó Unido, and I think that was an advantage for Cerro Porteño, and they were hungry, Roberto. I mean, this team did not do good. The players did not do they didn't have a good time against Olimpia last season, and I think they kind of owed it to themselves, and you can see that they were hungry for that situation, right? To try to take the Superclásico back home and to get the big results. That's why I think they were the team that looked better on pitch. But yeah, it was a problem when Miguel Martinez got sent off. That changed the whole situation for Cerro Porteño, and Olimpia really changed it with themselves. I mean, they have experience right there in the bench, right? They brought Antolino Alcaraz, 40 years old. They put a line of just 3 defenders, and they were just throwing the ball up there with Richard Ortiz taking over for that midfield. That was somewhere where Cerro was really strong pretty much all match around. But when Richard Ortiz came in, you could see that he was very precise with the ball, and especially giving it to Derlis Gonzalez, leaving him one-on-one. That's how the situation for Miguel Martinez decision and the red card came about also. That was pretty much the only opportunity we saw Derlis Gonzalez get. Before that one, I mean, Patiño and Baez were all over him. He wasn't getting pretty much anything in front of Miguel Martinez. So that really changed it up. And then you had Bruera. Bruera was the big signing for Olimpia. We talked about him at the first episodes when the opportunity was starting. He could be the star of this team. He was called upon to be the goal maker and the big striker, and he lost his spot to I wouldn't say he lost the spot to another player, because I don't think Brian Montenegro did much to take the spot away from him, but he just wasn't bringing enough to the team as a player. Bruera to keep that spot, right? To keep that starting spot. And he came in this match really well. He was pretty much unstoppable on those air balls, and they had Cerro Porteño had to bring in Eduardo Brock to kind of change it up to kind of solve that situation, but it was kind of late. Olimpia had done their damage. They got another penalty, and it was a tie. And I think looking at the match itself, each team had its moment. Yeah, maybe Cerro Porteño had more moments in the match where they looked better. Olimpia, this was their third match not winning, so you could see that something was not okay in this team, maybe even in the locker room. That's why now we have the news that the coach was sacked. There's versions that he was the one that ended up quitting when they told him that they were going to let him go. He wanted to leave like a champion. He did a really good job, I believe, of building this team of Olimpia, but it was not easy to keep it. It was not easy to keep it stable this year. And they had signings, Roberto, this year. So I think they took that bar a little higher. They were waiting for a team to be much stronger after 6 games, and they did not get that against Cerro Porteño. Cerro looked better. Maybe they deserved it a little bit more, but it was a 2-2 draw. We still got more Clásicos on the way this year.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those games that Olimpia could have done better. They had been, not well in the defensive side, like we mentioned last time around. And like you said, Fede, they didn't work on it. They showed a lot of, they didn't show improvement in that area, which is why, they were pretty much losing the game towards the end of the game. And I think it was mostly luck, the fact that they ended up tying. I'm not too sure if they actually deserved the tie because they didn't play as well as they could have. Cerro, came hungry and they wanted to win, showed that. And, that's the difference when you see a team that is dedicated and is ready to give the results that they need, especially for a big game like this. I'm not sure what happened to Olimpia there. They were a little bit lucky, with with the red card and then the penalty. So if it wasn't for that, I don't think they would have lost. They would have lost definitely for sure. So a lot of improvement needs to be done. I'm not sure what they're gonna do now, with their new interim coach. Hopefully, they focus on the bats and the stuff that they couldn't figure out beforehand. We'll see what happens with them. I think it's going to be a rough time for Olimpia coming on right now. The game was obviously, you could see that there's some rough patches that they gotta work on. That this is the time to do it. Now with a new coach, maybe it's a new beginning for Olimpia. But yeah, that game was definitely that. Was like, what are you guys doing? And it was frustrating for a lot of people. Frustrating, especially at home. To be defeated. In the field like that. You had the results, but you were honestly defeated, in the game. So definitely something that they have to work on for the next game. We'll see what happens. But I wasn't too happy with the results. I did say that it was going to be a tie, but I thought it was going to be more intense. I thought it was going to be more leveled in terms of playing quality. And I didn't see that. So we'll see, guys.
We definitely will see. And obviously this comes, of course, with the sacking of Julio Cesar Caceres, the manager of Olimpia. Just looking at some of the stats here, it actually has some really good numbers. Julio Cesar Caceres, from an interim manager, someone with little to no experience, he managed 77 games. Of those 77 games, he's won 43 of them, drew 15, and lost 19. And so that's like a 62% efficiency rate. and he's won the Copa Paraguay. He won the Supercopa back in 2021, and he won the Clausura. So 3 titles in 2 years when you're battling out with the likes of Cerro, Libertad, Guarani, and so on is really good when you think about it, Fede. But, I'm curious to see what happens now, because certainly there had been some rumors. Yes, Maria had mentioned it beforehand. The name of Chiqui Arce has been going back. He obviously had his experience at Olimpia. He won as a manager over there as well. There had been also talks about Juan Pablo Cumpido, the former Ameliano manager as well. So this is going to be interesting to see how Olimpia go forward. I don't know if they're going to go for a really big name, certainly at least big in the sense of managers from outside of Paraguay. I mean, there had been some rumors of Miguel Ángel Ramírez, the former manager of Independiente del Valle, who won in Ecuador, the Sudamericana. So I'm curious to see what will happen to them, Fede, because I think, similar to what Cedro has done in getting rid of Chiqui Arce, bringing in a manager like Facundo Sapa, who obviously had no experience managing in Paraguay, but obviously had his experience working elsewhere. Do you feel that maybe Olimpia should go through that route? Should they continue to go local, or even, I don't want to say that this is the case of what happened with Julio Cesar Caceres could be the same for the interim manager, Aitor Garcia, but what do you feel as if, though, for an Olimpia standpoint? I'd like to hear what Maria thinks as well, just how they can manage their entire season, especially with Libertadores coming up in a few weeks as well.
Yeah, it's not an easy team to handle at all. It's one of the biggest teams here in Paraguay. The pressure is always on for the fans on this team, and that locker room is not easy either, Roberto. I mean, Julio Cesar did that transition from being a player, retiring, and becoming that second team coach, that reserve team coach, and then he made that leap to becoming the first team coach. So he pretty much knew all these players. He played with them on those last years as he was retiring. So he was pretty much friends with all of them. David Gonzalez, the captain of this team, Richard Ortiz, who he had to sit down pretty much these last couple of days, these last couple of games. That must have been a hard situation to handle. And all these problems that we were talking about, the defense, the midfield, and not getting the right pieces or the right opportunities for Facundo Breda, which was your big signing. And then the results weren't coming along either. You lost the Supercopa at the beginning of the year. This was their third game that they couldn't win. I mean, there were enough reasons to let him go, but I just thought that they were going to respect him a little more. He's a young Paraguayan coach. I think a lot of people are feeling that also, that maybe if it was a coach from outside of the country, if it was an Argentinian coach or a Brazilian coach, they would have hanged on a little bit more. They would have seen where the team was going. They didn't give him any more time. So there's people that are on one side and there's people that are on the other side. There were a lot of people that were criticizing him because not having a style of play, being so clear after 2 years of being on the job. So I think the next coach is going to have a real task ahead of him. I mean, he has a team that already knows each other, that already knows how to play, but he's got to take it to the next level. And he's got to take it to the next level with the signings that they made at the beginning of the year that were okay signings, not the biggest signings that Olimpia has made along their history. But just how far can Olimpia really expect to go in this Libertadores? When Olimpia plays Libertadores, that's where their fans' heads are. And this Apertura is really getting out of their hands. I mean, Libertad just keeps on winning, so it looks even harder and harder to catch up. They still got to play against Libertad, but they got to bring in a coach that knows his stuff. I think Fernando Jubera is a good coach. He's available. Chiqui Arce is always a good opportunity to bring him back. He did a great job when he was managing this team, and even in the middle of a crisis also. So we'll see just which way they end up going, but I do think they're going to go with a local coach, just because the league has already started and they got to rebuild pretty much everything. I mean, Julio Cesar took everybody with him. Only Aitor Garcia has been left behind, and he was brought by the front office. He wasn't part of the team that was working with Julio Cesar. That's why he took the job on. They even wanted to keep Eduardo Paloroso working for the club, but he resigned also because he was brought by Julio Cesar. I really thought that Julio Cesar had a lot in front of him. I thought he was going to be on the job for a while still, but hey, This is Paraguayan football. It just doesn't surprise you one game, and it changes around very quickly, especially for the managers. We've seen it ever since week 2, I believe, when we saw the first manager being sacked. So yeah, we'll see where Julio Cesar goes now, Roberto. Also, because Julio Cesar, just like I was saying, he's a very young coach. He did a very good job in Olimpia. He played in Brazil. He played in Argentina. So I don't think he's gonna have trouble finding a new spot also for his job. As for Olimpia, they only have a month to get their stuff together. If not, those stands are going to start to look empty, Roberto. If this team is not playing for championship level, if this team is not playing for the first spots, I mean, it's going to look really bad for this team. This team was built for a championship, and they look really far from it right now.
I think it was a year and almost a half that he was there, and he was already the second most successful coach in the club. So it was definitely something a little shocking for everyone to hear. And I think I would like also a local coach to continue on with Olimpia. But they do have a lot of big names attached to them right now. I even saw just now that Tata Martino was one of the rumors. So we'll see. Maybe it could be also a good if they really want to win big again and do everything that they promised that they were gonna do. Then someone big like that could be a solution. But it is tougher, for an outsider to come and take over, a team that's already established right now. It's already almost midway into the season. So we'll see. There's a lot of pressure for the club right now in all kinds of ways, in all senses. So I don't know. It's gonna be a rough couple of weeks, I think, for them. But the main thing for them is to just continue doing their thing. They're gonna be playing against Nacional this weekend, so hopefully they get a win there. I do think that they could make get a win this time around. But like I said, this is Paraguayan soccer, and you never know what's gonna happen. So everything is on the cards right now for this team. They're back into the rough days, and I think that it's just a little bump in the road. They always come back and make things work, and look at what happened to Cerro. Second week of the season, and Chiquiase was sacked, and they're here, they're strong, and they're showing everyone that it's possible. So I think that Olimpia can do it. It's going to be a little rough on them for now.
It is going to be difficult. I mean, certainly, obviously, the game, I think, in about a couple of weeks, the game against Libertad that we'll talk about later on in a future episode, that's going to be the big one. I think that's the big game there, because certainly that can indeed decide the title there and there, or it could lead into another title race. Like I said, Libertad currently in first place with 16 points, a 5-point gap between them and Guarani, who also won. And Guarani are sneaking up there. We'll talk about them soon in a future episode as well, about how they're sneaking up there. But, certainly I think for both Olimpia and Cerro's case, they definitely need to get their winning ways from the get-go, because, I think it's looking like Libertad's title again. I mean, yeah, we're only 6 games in. It's only a third of the season, but, I think assessments could be made early on that Libertad haven't lost a single game yet. Yes, Cerro Porteño also haven't lost a single game yet, but they've also had more draws in them. So it is likely that the season could indeed turn its tide a bit more. And, Ganya Ganero knows how to win titles like that. So it could indeed decide that way. And for Olympia's case, yeah, I mean, they've dealt with this before. They dealt with much worse. So they have that kind of like expertise on how to deal with this type of drama. It's in their kind of their DNA. And so we're going to have to wait and see what they can do, if they can make things interesting in this league race. And certainly with the Libertadores coming up as well, I actually want to switch gears to the big game for the Paraguayan side in the Libertadores. Before we do that, though, there is Sudamericana we will mention. We got Guarani taking on Sportivo Almediano. tomorrow at the time of recording. And today, Tacuary taking on El Caballero of Juan León Mallorquín. Four sides, who have made it to the Sudamericana first stage. Obviously, the teams taking on each other in this first stage are always the teams within the same country. So definitely keep an eye on what's been going on with those two teams, as we'll talk about them soon. But obviously, the mention today is obviously what's going to be happening on Thursday at the Castelao in Fortaleza as Cerro Porteño travel to Brazil to take on the aforementioned team. This is an interesting one, Fede, because like we mentioned beforehand, this is the kind of stage where, someone like for Facundo Saba, who I think, should feel as if though a bit buoyed of what we saw in the Superclasico, feeling that, something like that shouldn't happen in a game like against Fortaleza. So this is definitely one to obviously look into. And I just want your thoughts on how you can assess this game for Facundo Sanda, for Cerro, and if it's possible for them to steal some sort of result in Brazil, which for Paraguayan sides, it's become very difficult to get that.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of those matches where we're going to see if Cerro Porteño is going to go all out with what we saw against Olimpia, with what we saw against Curicó Unido, a team that wanted the ball more than its opponent and wanted to propose and wanted to have more opportunities. They really took the ball away pretty much in these last couple of games. That's something that Saba has clearly been working on, the possession, the attacking football. He wants a big team to look that way, right? Like it's the big team. And if you look at Fortaleza, yeah, they got a pretty interesting fan base, but they're not a huge team in Brazil. So maybe they'll play like the small team in this series also, but they're going to try to get something at home. So this is where the challenge is ahead of, I believe, for the Cerro Porteño, right? Against the Brazilian team. These teams play at a high pace and they're going to make you run for it. And Cerro Porteño has been running a lot. That's why I was thinking that against Olimpia, he was going to change it up a bit, that he was going to look at the players that were tired, maybe let them rest. But since the match is on Thursday, they played on Saturday against Olimpia. So apparently in the coach's head, it's enough time for the players to get 100%. And if they get John back at the goalkeeper position, which is vital, I believe, in this point, after what we saw, especially from Miguel Martinez in these 3 games where he had trouble against Guarani, he had trouble against Olimpia. We pretty much didn't see him against Curicó Unido because Curicó Unido didn't do much in both matches. But you're going to need John now. You're going to need that Brazilian goalkeeper that knows Brazilian strikers, that's not going to have problem with the atmosphere where they're going to play this first match. So Cerro needs all their players. Cerro needs all the power that they can get. And they're going to need, I believe, some help also from the bench, Roberto, that they're not getting lately. You're not seeing the best from Brian Zamudio. He's getting all the chances. He's not doing anything with it. He didn't do anything with the opportunity, those minutes that he had again in the Superclasico. He had a big opportunity to make a big play, and he just stumbled again with the ball. Same thing against Curicó Unido a couple of games ago. He's been coming in, but not making a difference, not doing much in the team. And then you have players like Antonio Galliano that have been hitting the door lately, that have been getting more game time. Wilder Viera has earned the spot in the midfield. So there are players that are taking advantage of your opportunities. And I think it's going to be on the coach to really manage the situation correctly and give the players that are deserving the opportunity to play a little bit more. Marcelo Moreno Martins is coming in. He's not doing anything either. So you're going to have to end these games with maybe Morales and Turin. You're going to have to play them maybe your full 90 minutes because the subs you're putting in, they seem to have the quality, they have the resume, but they're not bringing it into the pitch. So I think Cerro is going to have to bring it against Fortaleza straight away, or at least come alive and try to knock this team out in La Olla Azulgrana next week. I think that's also a big possibility, maybe a tie, but I'm expecting Cerro to keep being the big team, Roberto. I'm expecting for Cerro Porteño to go out on every pitch and try to get the big result. I think that's what Facundo Saba is also bringing lately to the squad, the winning mentality, which I'm seeing from Cerro Porteño in these first games.
And Maria, I wanted to get over to you on this one because I think if Cerro are able to get a good result in Brazil, I do fear how the pressure might come in the next game over there at La Olla. Yes, I think it's always good to play your first games away from home, because that way you have a chance to obviously, home field advantage and that kind of thing. But I just worry that maybe for some of these guys, and Cerro Porteño have always had these underwhelming performances sometimes, that maybe the pressure gets into them because we've seen how they play. There is that winning mentality that Facundo Stava is trying to get. But I am going to be a bit curious about like how some of these players, like you said, like Moreno Martin, Samudio, many players who really haven't been able to step up to show that they're good enough. I fear that maybe the pressure is just going to be too much for them in the next game. But again, I think that's the beauty of sport, that anything can happen. But that's just my fear about like how sometimes these teams just might be too pressured, especially with the fans all coming at you, trying to expect much, much more from you.
I think when it comes to Libertadores, it's always pressure, no matter what. But I think they do have some good advantages, sorry, to them this time around. They are going to play home on the way back, so that helps a lot. Regardless, they have to have a good result away. And playing in Brazil is, it's very tough no matter who you play. They are pretty much the kings of Libertadores and Sudamericana. So there's that in the back of their heads, I'm sure. But I think they do have some good advantage. They have a good team on their hands. Although they tied in the Superclasico, they're coming from pretty much a win for them. Playing wise in the field, like I said, they won the game, and they can continue doing that. And now they have the return of Jean Fernandez, which is great for them. It's going to help out a lot, I think. And just playing with the mentality of winning, does a lot of wonders. Like Fede was saying, you have to have that kind of talk with your team, because what's a coach, for if you don't have someone cheering you on like you're supposed to as a coach, not just telling you what to do, but also giving you that talk, that confidence that you need before you step into the field. So for me, I think yes, it's very tough, and playing playing away from home, and also the match, one of the phases before the group stage is also very stressful in this situation. But I think that they have been improving, that they've been showing a lot of improvement in the field, and I really like the Cerro Porteño team right now. They have shown that no matter what, the circumstances that they have gone through, they can come back, and they might not, do well in the Apertura, but they could do, and they could have some good results in the Libertadores, and I think that they're going to make it far in competition.
It's going to be very much an interesting tie that we'll look forward to. Obviously, the game kicking off on Thursday in Brazil, the return leg happening next week. Definitely a lot to speak about today here at Guarani Vision. I'm happy that we were able to do that today with the Superclasico and so on. So it's another great way to close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Maria Britos, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.